Hello friends, Steve Cross here and welcome to the Podden Prometheus.
Self-indulgence. Conceptual mindfuckery. If no one knows and no one cares, that's the only way you can get away with anything in this world.
Hello friends, Steve here, and a little bit of a change of direction for the Podden Prometheus today with a sports-themed podcast. Now yesterday one of my friends, Shay, posted on Facebook there are two types of people who watch the football or people who watch Loki, and I thought I watched them both. I'm the person who's been trying to do the odd football joke at Science Showoff for many years now and had every single one fail because it turns out my super nerd crowds don't get football references. You have to do about 10 minutes of Star Wars material to cheer them up after one football joke. And I thought that's not fair. We can't divide being a nerd from liking sport forever and ever. I do both. So what I've done today is I've assembled three incredible people with brains the sizes of planets, super nerds. There are degrees dripping out of this podcast. There are people that can code. There are people with extreme sci-fi addictions that verge into cosplay. And they all love sport. So we're going to find out why nerds should love sport and how to win. Enjoy Winning for Nerds. Hello everybody, welcome to Winning for Nerds, in which I, Steve Cross, talk to three people with brains the sizes of planets, all of whom have had success in the sporting world, to try and find out how they got there. I'm joined by three incredible people, and I'm going to say hello to them in the order that they are on my screen. Hannah, hello. Hannah, who are you and what are your sporting credentials?
Well, I am a scientist by training, but my first, I guess, love was sport. I'm very privileged to have very sporty parents and family. So I have my sporting credentials. I've played netball for England under 19 and Great Britain. I have an orange belt at karate, and I have done one lesson of horse riding. That's my credentials.
That's incredible. And you're already presumably Commonwealth Games standard at horse riding after your one lesson.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Right, let's fly over to Alice. Hello, Alice. Who are you? What are your sporting credentials?
Well, I'm Australian, so we grew up running pretty wild. But in terms of, having any kind of credentials, I think I'm number 11 for my age group in the London Marathon that I ran. And I rode for state as a schoolgirl, and I've just generally been involved in one sport or another most of my life without thinking of myself particularly as a sporty person. But I think I very much object, and maybe this is going into it a little too much too early, but I object to the false binary of mind versus body, that you're either a brain person or a body person, as though your brain weren't in there. And this, I think, has partly to do with the fact that my mum had MS, and so that's. I'll talk more about that later. But
Incredible.
It sort of fed into my ideas about this.
So, Alice, you're not very sporty for an Australian, which is to say, incredibly sporty by the standard of anywhere else.
Well, genuinely, when I went to university in England, it was an icebreaker to say, "What was your sport?" And the number of blank looks that I got from people. Just because everyone had a school sport that they played to some level, but apparently not.
Got to stay fit to run away from the wildlife. That's the lesson of Australia. Now let's fly over to Cerys Bradley. Cerys, hello. What are your sporting credentials?
Well, Hannah says she's blessed to have come from a sporty family. I feel like I was cursed. My dad played a lot of sports when he was younger, which is why he had a knee replacement at the age of like 55, and he was always very keen on us playing sports. So I spent every Saturday and Sunday morning sat in the car listening to Stephen Fry read Harry Potter whilst my parents swore at my brother playing various sports. So he used to play football on a Saturday, rugby on a Sunday, and my dad coached rugby, and my mum was always there genuinely like screaming at 14-year-old boys and the referee and anyone else who was present. And then I grew up in a very small village where there wasn't really anything to do but sports, and so I spent most nights of the week being very bad at sports. I played cricket, but I couldn't do any of the things. So I used to be a fielder right on the edge of the field, but I was quite fat. So they wanted me to still do some exercise. So every over I had to move to the other side of the field. So cricket was basically just jogging from one side of the field to the other. I played football. No one would pass the ball to me. If you don't ever touch the ball in football, it's basically just jogging. I played rugby. No one will pass the ball. That is just jogging. I played tennis. Most of that was going to get the ball after you've hit it out of the court. That is just jogging. That is all my sports. So I hated sports for most of my life. And then I very recently joined a rugby team. And it turns out that you don't really have to be good at sports to play rugby because you just run into people. I'm a forward, so you don't have to catch the ball. You don't have to pass the ball. You just run into people and fall over. And I'm very good at those two things. So that's my sport now.
Turns out what you hated was your family.
So my dad is now coming to watch my rugby games. And I think that, like, despite knowing each other for 28 years, for the first time in our life, we are actually friends because I now have opinions about the Welsh starting lineup. So we actually have a conversation like that we can have for the first time in our lives. It's very strange.
I was banned from attending my twin brother's rugby games because the first one I attended we went to the same primary school and then we went to different high schools. And the first one I attended in his year 7, he got tackled and I ran onto the field to defend him. So I was
The same thing.
I think that's exactly right, though. And Alice, aren't you a twin?
I am, yes, yeah.
So this is your twin brother?
This is my twin, yes.
Good. So one of the reasons I've got you on is that I've got twins who are 2, and there's one girl, one boy. And I've got to work out that delicate balance of, I'd like them to be interested in sport, but I don't want to force them. I don't want to feel the pain that Cerys felt, but I'm not quite sure I want to spend every single Saturday and Sunday driving them to matches, as Hannah's parents no doubt did. So I've got that in-between thing that I have to think about.
You don't want to get them interested in swimming, because swimming you have to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to get them to places.
Rowing, I think is
anything
the
to do with
worst
water, bad.
So here's the thing that I think about getting someone interested in sport is similar to the process of parenting, as far as I know, or as far as I can bear witness, or on the side of having been parented. It seems to be a matter of identifying what they are interested in and seeing what about something might be interesting to them. So for me, I was bullied at school and I was not very much a team player. So I tended to play things where there was an individual edge to it. Rowing is actually quite a solitary sport, even when you're in a quad or an 8, because you're all facing the same direction. So you're sort of in this communal experience, but you're not forced to interact and you can play your own part. And running, of course, very much like that as well. But, for example, I loathed netball because netball is a vector for bullying.
Right. I think on that, we have to cut straight to Hannah Thompson.
It's a very dangerous sport as well, isn't it, netball?
Hannah, so netball, bullying, not
Injuries.
for people who enjoy their own company, extremely dangerous. Your rebuttal.
Yeah, my rebuttal. I feel netball is very political. There is you need to get on with everybody, and you can often get into lots of fights and things within the team, and then the team just disintegrates from the inside, right? And that is a pain in the ass. And I have counteracted that by moving team every 2 years, so I don't have to put up with all of those things. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time traveling around for work and changing jobs and things. So I change netball teams a lot, and that helps with that side of stuff. My mum was my coach to start with, so it was hard. I couldn't really be too bitchy or bully, so I've grown up being quite nice and friendly, I hope, in my netball teams. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to get some people on to see.
The implication of that is that it's all a facade, and what you actually wanted to be was bitchy and bully, and you've just been holding it back this whole time. And then as soon as your mum is not your coach, you're just going to unleash it on everybody.
So for a sport that was invented as a ladylike sport, it doesn't have the kind of running and contact that, for example, basketball has. It is it's so wildly aggressive and violent. My twin brother's wife is a world champion indoor netball player.
Amazing.
And she's 6 foot tall and she's an absolute Amazon, and she can just, she's just a supreme athlete. And watching her netball games, which I have occasionally done in the name of family support, is genuinely more traumatic than watching an action movie. It's so aggressive.
Yeah, I like the aggressive side of it. So I think when I play with my mum's team, my mum's 50 now, and I just sort of catch up with her by playing netball with her team, which is super slow, and I get really annoyed because I can't smash into people as much as I would playing in the national team. So yeah.
But I mean, that's the sort of the nature of it being political, is that you have to pretend that you're not intending to smash into people when you obviously are.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Yeah,
I didn't
so
intend to do that.
does a sorry do? Because when I used to play 11-a-side football, a lot of the time I was playing against people who were a lot younger and a lot faster than me, and I was a defender. So a lot of my game involved tripping them up, pulling them back, generally anything like that. I actually gave up the day that one guy who was taller than me rounded on me, started screaming in my face, and what he was screaming was the phrase, "I'll wet you up." And I didn't know what this meant, so I just started laughing. And he kept shouting it louder and louder. And in the end, his bench emptied in order to haul him off, which is a thing that I've never seen happen in sport, is that the bench empties to drag their own player off.
Amazing.
But it turns out "I'll wet you up" means I will stab you. So that was the time when I was like, I'm now not fast enough to play 11-a-side against 19-year-olds anymore. I need to stop.
Yeah, I would have thought your tactic would be some mental word calling.
I like the idea that you cancelled because the banter wasn't good enough, not because the threat was intimidating. It was because it was just badly delivered.
Well, it was more that I just spent the whole game pulling him back and doing no actual football in any sense. But going back to Hannah's mental point, when I used to play hockey at school, a lot of it was mental because we were a little posh school. Sometimes we'd play against state schools, and the state schools would destroy us because the state schools had ethnic diversity, which means they had loads of 6 foot tall people from Indian or Pakistani backgrounds who'd been playing hockey since they were 1. And they would absolutely batter us. So we like playing against other posh schools where it's just loads of other white boys who are rubbish at hockey. But they were dead easy to wind up and intimidate.
I think that's one of the great things about sport, that is much more... There is a lot more natural diversity, particularly in team sport, particularly in places like football or rugby, than in the arts where a lot of diversity pushes can feel forced. Basically there's a huge number of scholarship boys at private boys' schools, which is the ones that you pay for in Australia. Huge proportion of people who've just been shipped in to be part of the rugby team who are getting, entree into these extremely exclusive kind of otherwise what you would think of as white man circles.
I think that is bullshit. Every single girl who played sport in my high school looked absolutely identical, down to the Pineapple Studios tank tops and matching underwear. That is ridiculous. The whole point of team sports is that you look like a team, and everyone does. And then if you look like a team where you all look absolutely identical, and then there's one person who has clearly been brought on because they are of a different race and people presume that they're good at sport, that is no more forced than kind of diversity quotas in the arts. That is not my experience of sport at all.
I think it's a different thing in different countries. The UK doesn't really have the idea of a sports scholarship except for things like rowing at Oxford and Cambridge. So international rowers can always do a master's in education at Oxford and Cambridge. Whereas Australia, I assume, is more like the American system where school sport matters because it becomes college sport. So in America, you do get these incredible things where all of the sports teams are people from extremely poor backgrounds in these incredible universities that cost a fortune to go to otherwise.
Which is not to say that there aren't, downsides to that idea that for people who are part of ethnic minorities, that sport or rap is the only way out of that particular, socioeconomic bigotry that happens. But I think it is one of the things that you see in Australian schools and universities is this odd sportsman-like egalitarianism, which I think is a little it's a little limited, more limited than you'd want it to be, but it is a positive thing.
Yeah.
I'm a bit nervous to say I did get a scholarship to go to uni for netball.
Wow.
Only £500, so
Oh, well.
don't know
Barely
where I
a
sit in the camp.
scholarship by the
But
standards.
yeah, they did bring in people to Bath Uni for netball. Sort of, it was an intensive netball centre. So
What did you spend your £500 on, Hannah?
obviously on protein powder.
Spend it on
Yeah,
games.
sadly, I bought lots of buckets of things that that I didn't actually use in the end. The meal went out of date. And then I busted my knee and they chucked me out of the scholarship. So
That's a bit harsh.
yeah, I do have
suppose-
a titanium knee now, so it's all good.
That's pretty exciting.
How did you bust your knee?
Before uni started, we went for pre-season. We trained 3 times a day for 3 weeks in a row, and then I went to an England camp on my knee. I was just running in a straight line, and then it blew up, basically. I was very tired, I think.
Wow.
And I think in hindsight, my body mechanics probably weren't set up to play netball. Like, if I tried to squat down, I'd get like 2 inches and then just fall to the floor. And after I had my surgery, they were like, maybe you shouldn't have been playing. I was like, damn it. But now they screen everyone for that, so that's good.
So my dad had his knee replaced last year, like just before the pandemic, because he played a lot of sports when he was younger. He played rugby, and then when he was too old for rugby, he played football, and he got like tackled by someone whose their boot caught him in the back of the Achilles, like just ripped his Achilles open, and so he had to have surgery on that. And then he had a bad knee, and as a consequence, his legs were very wonky. And so the one calf on his right hand side is like two times the size of the calf on the other side because of the having to compensate for his weaker knee and his weaker Achilles. And then he's had his knee replaced, which it only takes like 6 weeks to recover from that surgery, which I thought was incredible. And then he was able to like walk on it and stuff again. And now, because his knee is better and he's more like balanced, but he's got this one monster calf, the quad on his other leg is now having to compensate. And so that has now got an enormous in comparison to his right quad. And so his legs, he's got one huge leg and one really skinny leg, but it's not the same leg. It's like 2 halves of 2 different legs that have been mashed together. So his body is really weird looking.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alice, did you pick up any injuries?
I broke my back rowing. So I was hit by a boat while in a boat and fractured my 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae and ruptured the disc. It was a minor fracture. I was about 17 and I recovered fairly quickly, but there was a couple of scary weeks there where I couldn't feel below my knees. A little worrying, but no long-term effects other than that I complain that I don't like sitting still for too long, but I think that's probably just that I don't like sitting still for very long, but I have an excuse that I once many years ago broke my back.
Perfect. I've got a very bad left knee from playing 5-a-side football at the Wellcome Trust Genome Campus during the Human Genome Project. It was a particularly brutal sliding tackle from behind by a genome sequencer. The annoying thing is, he didn't even hit me. I heard it coming, so I jumped over the top. And then it was the landing on the bad surface that twisted my knee. And still, when it's cold, I can feel it. It's
Yeah.
And of course, I played basketball for 5 years, so my knees and ankles are just disasters generally, just weakness and swelling. If I ever play anything now, it's like supports on everything strapped round and round and round and round.
I've recently discovered the miracle that is K-tape, which has just been like an absolute revelation, because we've just played like a mini COVID season, like a small pre-season, because we haven't been able to play contact for a year. And I have had a couple of injuries in matches. In our first match back, someone grabbed me by the top knot and pulled me onto my head in an attempt at a tackle, which was my first time experiencing like shock on a rugby pitch. That was quite scary. because I'm not really sure what happened, but we've kind of like pieced it together from photos. And I hit the ground and then was immediately crying. And then our physio and stuff came over, and I was like, oh no, I actually think I'm fine. I think it's just shock. I'll be okay now. And they were like, it will not be. You will lie there until we're happy for you to walk off the pitch. And then I wasn't allowed to play the rest of the match. And then not the next match, but the next match after that, I got tackled and my foot got trapped as I went down, and there was such a loud click that the ref instinctively blew his whistle and was like, what was that? What has snapped? But my worst injury that I've had this season was in training in a warm-up thing. Like, we were not doing contact. We had not even properly started the training session yet. We were just doing a small warm-up drill, and the ball got dropped. So I was tidying up the ball at the same time that someone else was trying to tidy up the ball, and we got tangled up as we fell over, and something happened in my shoulder. And now, like, if it's going to rain, I now get pain in my shoulder blade, and I think that's just going to be my life for the rest of my life. I'm just now going to have this weather predicting shoulder blade. And that one took quite a long time to heal. But K-tape fixes anything.
And it's
We've
colourful.
done injuries. I want to talk about transgressions. I want to know about sendings off, bannings, stern words from referees and controllers, cheating. What have you done?
The only memories I have is from very young. My mum used to run this club called Cheadle Cherries Netball Club when we lived in Manchester. And this girl was annoying me, so I threw the netball at the back of her head really hard. Unfortunately, she lived on the same road as me, and we were giving her a lift home. And I just remember being so angry, and I can't remember why. But just so we had to give her a lift home, and that she was there. But then I learned not to do that because it's very nasty. I haven't done that since. But that's all I could think of.
Considering how aggressively you play, that's absolutely amazing. Alice, any misbehaviour?
Not in informal sport, but certainly growing up with a twin brother, there was all sorts of ways of evening the score equitably. My brother liked to do a lot of like violent games, like running around, sort of wrestling or jumping off things or getting tackled. And so my tactic would be, as a child, I would occasionally fake an injury, and then when he came in close, I'd whap him. That was my most Machiavellian phase of life, was like the playing dead, and then when he came in to see if I was all right, I'd lash out brutally, punishing him for his empathy.
That starts with twins early, though. By the age of 2, my daughter would hit my son in the face, then burst into tears and say, "Ben pushed me."
Oh.
It's like, no, we were watching the entire incident. Cerys, you been sent off yet?
No, I find the whole like cheating thing very difficult. So we have had a couple of, when we've been trying to explain, because rugby obviously has quite a lot of rules and it's quite complicated. And when we're trying to clarify rules in training sessions, so I play in a development team, which means that most people who join the team have never played rugby before, and it's all about like getting more people involved in rugby. So we have a lot of new people trying to understand the rules, and our coach will always be like, you just do whatever, and then if the ref says that's not allowed, you say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I'm very new to this game, I didn't understand." But like I do not have the capacity to lie like that. So if I was going to do something intentionally bad in the game, then I would be too paranoid about people being able to see through the lie. And we had a match a week ago, and I scored. Scored a try, and it was like quite a tough kind of try. It was thank you. Scored actually 2 in that game, and we still lost by so many points. But it was like pick up the ball from a ruck and then have to run through a whole bunch of people and get it on the floor kind of try. And then I got it down, and then one of the players from the opposition put her hands underneath the ball, and then we were like looking at the ref to see if he was going to award the try, because it was definitely a try, and then she just cheated. And I was complaining about this to my captain, and my captain was like, "Yeah, I definitely would have done that. You've got to try it, because if you get away with it, then they won't get the try." But that makes me feel very uncomfortable. But the story that you told, Alice, about running onto the pitch when your twin got tackled, there was I remember a tournament that my brother was playing in once when my dad was coaching him, and he was like on the edge of the pitch, and my brother was in a ruck, and a boy from the opposition was like kneeing him in the kidneys, and my dad, without thinking, just reached into the ruck and grabbed the boy that was like kneeing my brother and pulled him off the ruck and just like out of the pitch, and then realized what he'd done, and the ref was like, what? And my dad was like, yes, I understand, and then just had to leave the pitch.
See, I'm worried about that with my kids, like, because I have always been a notoriously dirty and gobby player. So, and also somebody that will point out every tiny bit of cheating that the opposition is doing really, really, really loudly to try and gain the referee's affection. It doesn't work, but it winds the opposition up.
Yeah,
So, like, when that's happening, I'll be standing there going to the ref, that kid is elbowing my kid in there. And as the kid comes off, I'll be screaming in their face, you dirty little shit. You know, I was the sort of player that if somebody was really dirty, I just wouldn't shake their hand when they left the pitch, which led to at one point a centre forward having to be restrained because he was he'd been just pulling at me for the whole game, and then when I shake my hand, I just went nah, walked off.
Did he threaten to wet him up?
Fucking mind. It was his own team had to restrain him again. I haven't even got onto my sendings off. Cerys.
So like rugby parents are terrible people, I think. We played a match at Chiswick once, and Chiswick is quite a posh club. They have like one of those fancy 5G pitches, and we were using their pitch because the game previous, it had rained so much that before the game, we as a team had to go onto the pitch with buckets and spades to get rid of all the water because it was a drowning hazard in all of the like puddles on the pitch. When we turned up at Chiswick, there was a youth game, like an under 15 game happening before us, and it was Chiswick versus Hammersmith. And so the Chiswick team were all these incredibly well-fed, massive boys. They were all like 6 foot and really built and really fit and healthy. And then all the Hammersmith kids were like tiny and malnourished and weedy. And they were getting absolutely destroyed. When we got there, Chiswick was like 50 points up. It was ridiculous. And there was this mother who was part of the Chiswick's team who was screaming and swearing at all of the Hammersmith boys, like properly swearing at them. And when we were watching, this poor kid from Hammersmith who was like losing so badly walked past this woman who was telling him like to fuck off and stuff. And he turned around and was like, oh, just leave me alone. And then she sicked her boy on him. She was like to the Chiswick team, you get him. And was just like calling on her boys to seek out this kid and attack him on the rugby pitch. And then everyone else was like, yes, this is perfectly normal behavior, that we won't tell this woman to calm down or leave. Do not be one of those parents, Steve.
But it's difficult. Like if you're a kid playing against adults, that's really difficult as well. When I was 13, I was playing for my school's hockey team, and we played against a local, like a grown-ups club. Was I 13? No, I was 15. We played against this local grown-ups club. And so I was 15. I'm trying to mark some 42-year-old grizzled veteran who's got every trick in the world. Like my ankles are practically bleeding from how much they've been tapped. And then he scored a goal. And in the depths of my frustration, I shouted to the referee, also a member of the same adult team, can't we disallow it because he's a wanker? And the ref called me over and he said, listen, I've had to talk to you already about your language. And I said, no, you haven't. That was number 3. I'm number 13. Look. And then he sent me off. Foul and abusive language. First person to be sent off in, I think, 10 years playing hockey for my school for foul and abusive language, all of which I feel was justified. The ref doesn't know the difference between 2 numbers, and his friend was a wanker.
All this talk is reminding me of when I went to watch my brother have in a boxing match against a kid, and their family were shouting at the kid like, we're not going to give you any birthday presents if you don't win. And the kid was getting so like aggravated, and I started crying because I was like, this is so mean, the kid doesn't deserve it, I'm just going to get really aggressive on my brother. Oh my god. It's just a weird experience. I've never been back.
Can I give you the children's riposte to all of this? I was in the park 2 days ago with my 2-year-olds. We were watching 4-year-olds learn to play football because I want to get mine, looking at it and thinking we'll do that. And one kid was dribbling, they were all doing dribbling practice, and one kid dribbled the ball along stopped suddenly, just let his legs relax, and then lay down and started trying to go to sleep. And his dad's shouting, "Get up, come on, you've got to do that. It's not a competitive game or anything." And the kid's like, "No, just lay there, trying to go to sleep." I just thought that's the way you deal with it, passive aggression.
Mm.
Alice, you're about to say something amazing.
Yeah, this idea of the sort of the invested parents, I think that's where maybe I was lucky in terms of not getting turned off sport, because this odd thing where parents use their children as proxies for their own failures and disappointments in life, or their own desire to engage in the world. I don't know what it is, but my parents were very not interested in that. And there's this sort of narrative of like, oh, the boy waiting for his dad to come to his football game. And I cannot think of anything worse, than forcing your parents to watch a boring children's sports game. My mum would just come and sit and read in the stands, and I'd look over there and she'd be reading, and that would be fine. Or likewise, my dad would occasionally show up to things, but the idea of this kind of aggressive barracking from the sidelines seems strange to me.
Yeah, I didn't experience that at all, but now I experienced my mum shouting at the TV rather than me. So she even shouts at the TV when she's watching snooker. She just gets so invested in like any kind of sport, but I never noticed that at all when I was playing. I don't know what she was doing.
What's wrong with that? I think TV should be more of an interactive medium.
Yeah.
Legit. Weirdly, my parents don't sport at all, have never sported even slightly, could never understand when I did any. And I wasn't very good at any of it. I'm telling all these stories. I was never good. But sport was the thing that stopped me. The joke I always used to say was, sport is what stopped me becoming Morrissey. Because other than that, I was just like a fey child who thought he was cleverer than everybody else. Whereas a bit of being crap at playing right back at football really brought me down to earth and sorted me out.
See, I'm a massive believer in failure. I really think it's important to do things that you're not good at, just as a way of, and I think that's where sport is a good thing, and where this kind of false binary between mind and body breaks down, that like one of the best things about sport is it helps your brain. It helps you get used to working hard at something, or not being good at something, or trying and failing, or slowly improving, or all these other things where you can sort of shield yourself from reality, particularly in sort of intellectual pursuits, because it's all subjective, or it's all a matter of taste, or it's all a matter of opinion, or it's all a matter of politics. Whereas, if it's you and this goal, you're either doing it under the time or you're doing it over the time. Like that's... it. And maybe that's why I was drawn to these sort of semi-individualistic sports.
Rugby is not good for your brain, though, at least long term. Like if you're looking for a sport to help your brain in old age, like you should do some Sudoku or something, or be a back, I guess.
Yes, I exclude high impact sports.
No, so I had two great uncles who played rugby. One of whom played for Leicester Tigers professionally, and the other one who played for the Leicester Tigers B team, and had a lot more fun because there was a lot more beer involved. But my great uncle David, he had the most caps ever for Leicester Tigers, and then he got Parkinson's, and we were not surprised because he played in the days when they didn't really believe that concussion was a thing. So. Yes, I think like some rowing is going to be a more stimulating brain activity, less dangerous.
Well, the really good discipline of rowing is that most of rowing is like nigglingly unpleasant. So you have these moments of transcendence where it's dawn and everything's moving smoothly, and everyone's moving together, and the boat is moving like just silk through the water, and there's birds and the sunrise, and it's glorious. But the rest of it is just like, every time you bring your oar back, it chips something, like as you're just clicking against something and there's a bolt sticking out that's scraping your hip, and somebody behind you's leaning to the left, and you have like just incredibly frustrating. And I do think of that as being like quite a good discipline for everyday life, that you just have to stay focused through all of this garbage.
Hannah, you've got a long and storied career. Are there moments that you think about where you're like, this is when it really came together?
There was a moment when I was growing up, I was quite tall, but then as I got better at netball, everyone got taller than me. I got pushed into the centre of the netball I guess, the lineup. So I was centre court, which meant I had to be much fitter. And I remember a few sessions I just was hitting this wall of fitness where I was like, I can taste blood in my mouth. I'm running, but I can't concentrate, or like I'm losing everything. And then I just decided to push through one day. And for some reason it worked. I was just like that mental engagement in that, I don't know, whatever it was that helped me get through and be quite a good player in the end in the centre, which surprised me. And I spoke about this with my sister. She also played netball for England, but indoor netball in the nets, inside nets. And she had a similar experience as well. It was really interesting, and just kind of like, mind over body, I guess, in that sense. Really helped.
I had a similar thing to Hannah, but not necessarily on the pitch, and more to do with the like pints drinking afterwards. Because in our team, when we play at the end of the game, we nominate a best forward, a best back, and then a player's player, and you have to do a boat race with the other team. And the first pint that I ever had to down for my team, I like choked it down and then went and threw up in the toilets because it was like fizzy and horrible, and it hit my stomach, and then it just came straight back up again. But the last time that I had to do it, I got it down in 3 goes, and I was not the fastest person, because we have a player on our team who, she played rugby all the way through university. She was on the first women's team at Leicester University to play in the Leicester Tigers stadium. And she's forward, and she's like, very, very, very good at rugby, but she also can down a pint in like 2 seconds as if it's not a big deal. So she won, but then I was second, and I like did 90% of the pint in 1 go. And it's because I've been putting on all this training, and, I was hitting a wall and I couldn't get it, but then I pushed through, and now I can almost do the whole thing in 1 go. So that's been my big achievement of this season.
I wanted us to wrap up by just giving some advice to nerds who are thinking, sport's not for me, about what they can get out of it. And I'm going to start by just doing a couple of examples from my life so that you've all got a moment to think about what you were going to say. So I think the things that I learned was how to deal with other people. So I've only ever played team sports. I don't like individual sports, because it's the learning to play with other people that's the most important bit for me. If I'm going to do something on my own, I'll just play Fallout 4 again. And that was massive for me. Learning to support and lift up people was really important to me, because I was like this high-flying kid, and learning actually to help other people to develop was a big deal. And the other one was just spatial awareness. This is why I used to play a lot of point guard in basketball, and just the ability to be able to track where 9 other moving people are without necessarily having to look at all of them is amazing for parenting. So I can just sit in the park with my eyes relatively unfocused and still know at all times both the position and speed and direction of my children and everything else that's happening around me. So I don't freak out. Like, I can tell you in advance whether that bike that's coming from the far left is going to hit that child that's moving on. And that all comes from basketball, of the being able to look in one direction, still map all this stuff around me. So you should definitely do that. But also, you have to have a certain type of personality to be able to do that in basketball. Most people can't, but it's really good for training it. So I'm going to ask you all, we'll start with Hannah, and then we'll go to Alice, and then we'll go to Cerys. Why should all of our listeners who hate sport do it anyway? Hannah?
Well, I play ball sports as well, and I've really enjoyed the ability to catch things really quickly, falling off tables or anything like that. Also, my colleagues find it quite entertaining. They throw stuff at me and I can just catch it. Apparently, it's quite weird. That's a good party trick to have. Again, I like the observant angle. I'm quite good at watching stuff happen and getting enjoyment out of funny things that maybe happen in the street that maybe other people don't look at. And I think that's come from that perspective. Having the wider perspective across the netball court. And then I think communication is one of the things that I've enjoyed the most in my life, like learning to communicate with people and give feedback, which I think links into this learning from failure. And it took me 3 times to trial and get into the England squad, for example, but I'm not giving up. And I think that's what leads me to love working in startups so much as well, because I think lots of those skills are very transferable.
Amazing. Alice, why should nerds take up sport?
Because you only have what you have. So I'm going to come back to what I was talking about at the beginning, which was my mum had MS, and she had very limited energy, very limited physical ability. She would go every morning, she'd stagger down to the harbour and go for a little swim. And that was often the only thing she could do in a day. And then I would go to university or school and be surrounded by these like languid, beautiful art students who were like, who'd ever use their legs? And I just wanted... it made me so angry, and obviously, disproportionately angry because of this situation where people were sort of wasting what they could do. And I'm not one of these people who think that you need to like become, you don't need to treat your body like a temple, just treat it like a public toilet you're going to use again at some point. Just do a thing, just do something, do what you can do within your own constraints, within your own interests, within your own limits, because and again, it's not about being beautiful. I don't have that thing where I believe the smaller a woman becomes, the more powerful she is, like orange juice getting condensed. I don't think that. I just think you should do what you can, and then it gives you this sense of yourself in the world and your physical self in the world. Because it's very easy if you're an intellectual type person or a nerdy type person to live in a sort of a detached space. It's very addictive and very appealing. But there's so much interest and engagement in where that detached space meets with reality. And I think sport or any kind of physical activity gives you a way of engaging with the real world. And I think that's more interesting and more dynamic.
I don't know, I feel I have very complicated emotions about sport because I have played a lot of sports, all of them badly. Because it's not like I have no spatial awareness. I have no hand-eye coordination. I'm not very good at any of these things. But I've played a lot because it has been good for me in various ways. Like it's generally better for my mental health. I have done it because I've had a big crush on someone at my gym, and so it was like exciting to go and see them every day. I've had lots of different motivations for doing sports. I did Zumba for a very long time because it really helped with my programming skills, like going and learning all of the different dance routines was very good pattern recognition for me when I was doing my PhD. So there have been I would call them unexpected bonuses to doing this thing that I didn't on the face of it enjoy. But I think if you having found rugby recently and actually really enjoying it, having tried 1,000 other sports and not gone on with any of them, that has been quite fun. And so if you are someone who is listening and you think that you're crap at sports but you'd quite like to give it a go, the thing that I would say is that there are loads of very nerdy sports. You don't have to go and play football if you think that the football kind of culture is toxic, because you could go play Quidditch instead. Quidditch has a really wonderful community attached to it where they've got really inclusive policies and they want everyone to have a nice time. There is a sport that you can play which is modelled on pro bending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you throw beanbags at each other and it looks very fun. So if you want to play sports but you hate sports, there are lots of sports that exist for that, and there are lots of them that are kind of built around the communities that you are already a part of. And so if you're massively into fantasy or sci-fi series, you should see whether or not there is a sport from that thing, because that might be a better way of doing sports than being shouted at by a bunch of netballers who just want to barge into you on the court because you don't know how to play netball.
Yeah, if anyone wants to play the 4-dimensional freeze tag game from Ender's Game, it doesn't exist.
But you could invent it.
Is down.
I just think if it's not it, it's not it. People who play Quidditch don't play Quidditch. They play running around with sticks.
But they have so much fun whilst they're doing it, so it doesn't matter. And it's much better than Quidditch because trans people are allowed to play. So
Perfect. Good. Right, let's wrap up. Do any of you have any things you would like to advertise to our wonderful listeners?
Yeah, so I have a new work in progress show. It is called Sports Person, so has some similar themes to this podcast, and it's going to be on at the Camden Fringe on the 6th and 7th of August at 6:45 p.m. That's the Friday and Saturday, and then it will also be on at in Coventry at a date yet to be determined, but keep an eye out. and also at the Aberystwyth Festival. And you can find out more about that from the Aberystwyth Comedy Festival site.
I have a weekly podcast called The Gargle, which is a spin-off of the Bugle podcast. I also have a weekly podcast called Tea with Alice. I have a monthly podcast called The Last Post. I have a couple of documentaries up on Audible, and all of my stuff is available at patreon.com/Alice Fraser.
I have nothing to advertise, but you can find me at Dr. Hannah T on social media if you'd like.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you all very, very, very much. I look forward to all of our nerd friends sending us pictures of themselves covered in mud for some reason or another.
Yes.
It's been a real pleasure working with you all. Say bye-bye to our lovely listeners.
Bye everyone.